Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of this. Let me start over again. You know what? This doesn't get edited. That's fine. We can have a flub at the beginning. The Spidey Swing-Bys podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley of Systematic Geekology. As we continue on through all the appearances of Spider-Man from the very beginning, today we're going to be in Avengers 3, as well as Amazing Spider-Man 9 and 10. We'll be, like I said, starting with Avengers 3. This is only a cameo appearance, so we won't be going everything in the issue, but just to get all through the initial part there, the release date was November 5th, 1963. The story, The Avengers Meet Submariner. Written by Stan Lee, penciled by Jack Kirby, inked by Paul Reinman, colored by Stan Goldberg, lettered by Sam Rosen, edited by Stan Lee. So, our story today is a pivotal one for the Marvel Universe in that it's the first team up of Namor and the Hulk. And, after the event of the last issue of the Avengers, him feeling like he wasn't appreciated enough, he's now gone rogue. And now they've realized, we kind of screwed up there. Let's see if we can get Hulk back. That's not to be. So what is Iron Man's grand plan? So he's going to use a device that he's recently created. Oh, sorry, Tony Stark has created because, comic secret identities and stuff. It's called the image projector. So it's going to project him wherever he wants. So first he bothers the Fantastic Four at the Baxter Building. They haven't seen the Hulk. They're busy about their own stuff. Then he goes, the reason why we're here, to see Spider-Man, who is in the middle of a gunfight with a bunch of guys he's webbing up. And what it is on here, it is pretty funny. Just like the idea of him webbing these guys up. They've got the Tommy guns out and they're trying to shoot wildly. Iron Man's just like, hey, what's going on, Spider-Man? And Peter's just like, what is going on? Suffering spider webs. I must be working toward him seeing things because this is the first time he's ever met Iron Man. So if you were hoping for a story that was really cool for that to happen, no. He just kind of, even though technically they're not meeting because of the image projection thing, this is how they meet. So Iron Man asks him for help about the Hulk, and Spider-Man's like, why would I know anything about the Hulk? I'm not going to meet him for another couple issues. Sorry, guy. Hey, tells him to go try the Missing Persons Bureau. And this is, of course, Peter when he's at his prickliest in his early career. So Tony's like, whatever, and leaves. And then he tries the X-Men, because as we talked about last time, he had met the Angel in that stupid story where he turned evil because of radiation and mutations and whatnot. And it doesn't work. So they try and get to Rick Jones. Rick Jones, of course, knows that the Hulk is Bruce Banner. He's trying to help him out. They didn't go out to try and find the Hulk, fight against him for a bit in the desert. Then he flees from them, ends up in the sea after being dragged away by a river or something like that. Yeah, something like that. And that is where he meets Namor. Namor contacts him. They fight because, comics. And agree to team up against the Avengers. The Avengers then fight against them, and their plans are thwarted when everything is kind of broken up. He becomes Bruce Banner and flees from the fight. Does leave Namor alone to face the Avengers, and he decides to flee into the sea, and that is the end of Avengers 3. So if this was an Avengers podcast, I would have gone a little more in depth, but this is Spider-Man, so I say for the sake of the story here, what we care about is Spider-Man showing up in Avengers, and it is lackluster. I mean, he's not going to team up with them. This is like kind of a letdown as far as like meeting everyone. Well, he hasn't met everyone yet. He's out of the team there assembled. He has now met Iron Man. And he hasn't even met Iron Man because it was, once again, an image projector. Because I guess Tony's too lazy to actually travel to these locations. Sure. But what we get of him, that's perfectly in character for Peter to be the way he is right here. It's like, dude, I've got my own problems. Like, I don't know anything about the Hulk. Once again, was it 14 is when he in the Green Goblin end up fighting. And the Enforcers are there too, right? It's been a while. Yeah. So that's it for Avengers 3. Kind of a whimper of a beginning, not because the story itself is bad, because it's a good story, but as far as we're concerned, the Spider-Man stuff, next to nothing matters. All right, so moving on from there, we go to Amazing Spider-Man #9. The release date for this is November 12th, 1963. The story is called The Man Called Electro. This is written by Stan Lee and Dick Ayers, penciled by Dick Ayers. Wait, hold on. Ooh, that should be Steve Ditko, right? I copied the wrong things here. I think I did this the last time too. Gosh, I need someone to check behind me. So assume all the information is wrong except for the Stan Lees and Steve Ditkos of it all. So what else was happening in Marvel this month? Well, in Journey into Mystery 100, we see Thor fighting Mr. Hyde again, and he inks over the fact that he can't marry Jane Foster for like only the 100th time in like what 17 issues it's been since he first appeared. Yep. Let's see. Then in Sergeant Fury 5, we see the Howling Commandos make Marvel history as they face off against Baron von Strucker for the first time. A character who will have an immense importance in Marvel on the Shield side of things as time goes on. In Tales to Astonish 52, Giant Man and the Wasp work together against the first Black Knight. This, of course, being the villainous version of the Black Knight. We'll, of course, get a good Black Knight later on, but this is how it all starts. And an okay story, especially for Tales to Astonish. In X-Men 3, this is when the X-Men attempt to get the Blob to join the team because he's this giant muscle-bound guy. It's because of his mutation. But he, of course, has different things in mind for Jean, and apparently so does Professor X in one of the most terrible bits of early on Marvel. That, of course, is brought in later when the Onslaught stuff happens, because, that's when we want to remember our continuity, is when it's something creepy like this. Sure. Then moving on from there, we get to Fantastic Four 23, where Doctor Doom seeks to divide the team as he sends the terrible trio to drive them apart in not a terrible story, but not really a great one either. In Strange Tales 117, EO returns to menace the Human Torch, and Baron Mordo returns to face Doctor Strange, as Doctor Strange has gotten a little more popularity here. In Tales of Suspense 50, Iron Man must defeat his greatest foe of all time when the Mandarin comes to destroy him. And I will say it as much as I have to. The Mandarin is one of the greatest villains in Marvel history, and the fact that we can't use him today says more about Marvel than it does about the character. So that's on them to not do things, to continue not doing things correctly. So what we're concerned about, Amazing Spider-Man #9. We have the first appearance of Electro here, and a really great cover of him, Spider-Man, coming up from behind to grab Electro and getting shocked by him. And then a scene you will never forget. Excuse me, you will never forget. See the defeat of Spider-Man. Now we see Spider-Man moving around the city, web swinging away. Got some criminals fighting against the cops, gunning them down. They didn't give up when they see Spider-Man going past, but it's enough for the police to intervene. And the reason why, sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained today, is that he's so concerned with going back home and seeing Aunt May and making sure that her, medicines given to her, that she's taken care of, because the old bag just refuses to die. And she goes to sleep and thinks about everything that he's done, all the Spider-Man stuff that keeps getting in his way. At that same time, we see Electro suiting up for the first time as he kind of explains to no one except for us, the audience, that, he has, the power to use electricity for his own ends in these regards. And now is going to do what any sensible person would do: find an armored car which is carrying a shipment of gold and then take it for his own. He then shocks the people guarding it, the cops there, then uses it to steal the gold. Peter then calls the doctor in to watch over Aunt May, finds out that she's doing even worse. She's got to go to the hospital, and that, of course, means that that'll cost more money, because even in the 60s, the American healthcare system wasn't the best. And, she's more concerned about him. He's concerned about her. And that's always what it is between the two of them. They just can't talk to each other about what's going on. And, Peter, the longer it lasts, the worse it's going to be when she finds out who you really are. But, comics. We then flash over to school where, of course, Flash, pun unintended there, is, asking a bookworm what's new in Dullville. You can't even say Dullsville. Peter is too busy thinking about what's going on in his private life and his Spider-Man life to even bother about school, and Flash wants to confront him about the fight that he had. Peter gives him the total cold shoulder there, and Flash is not having that. Liz is very shocked. Peter then goes to the hospital to see Aunt May, and Betty is there, Betty Brant. And, she had heard about what happened to Aunt May, so she came over to look over her too, and a very, very sweet move because, like, they're not dating right now, but like she does care about Peter, and they're learning, about the two of them. So this is a very good start to their relationship. Obviously, I don't think Betty is Peter's one true love, but as far as like a starter girlfriend goes, I mean, not a bad one because yeah, there is a little more to her, which we'll learn over time, and there's a lot to Betty that's really fun, really engaging as a character. And of course, right here we see that she's very attentive to the needs of the people around her, and we'll learn a little bit about why later on. But she's very concerned for Peter because he's acting so calm, but she knows, being a little more in touch with her emotions than him, that this is a facade. And he could explode at any moment. He's got this deep secret he's carrying, but she doesn't exactly know why. And I think the only time Betty actually learned Spider-Man's secret is after Civil War, in the midst of Civil War, when he reveals his identity to the world. I'm pretty sure she doesn't learn it before then, which you could argue is cruel if he maintains a relationship with her in his life, as a friend. But yeah, there's some food for thought there. So he's got to go figure out some ways to, make some money, to sell some pictures to Jameson. It's starting to rain. There's a little bit of a lightning storm. And of course, that means that he is now drenched completely. So he has to go back home and, wonders if he might even get sick. Makes a funny a joke about how he wonders if even a Human Torch could have sinus trouble. It closes the shade because potentially someone could look in and see if he was Spider-Man. He tries to study, but he keeps reading the same thing over and over again because he's got a lot on his plate. We can go over to the Daily Bugle, the bank where J. Jonah Jameson is talking to one of the tellers there about what he wants to do, and that's when Electro decides to attack, and he shocks the both of them, and Jameson gets it in his head that because he knows who J. Jonah Jameson is, therefore Electro must be someone that he knows, which is a huge leap in logic because J. Jonah Jameson is a very public figure. So yeah, that's weird. Electro gets away with the money, and this is, of course, there to fuel his suspicions that Electro isn't who he says he is. He's actually Spider-Man, because only Spider-Man could have had these electric powers this whole time and never once used them, and use it instead as a way to defraud Jameson and steal his money. So he tells the police that Spider-Man is Electro. Then, of course, the article on the Daily Bugle the next day is that Electro is really Spider-Man, as said on the paper there, on the basis of indisputable evidence. The Bugle accuses Spider-Man of launching a crime wave, as disguised as, and that's where it kind of ends, but you get the gist there. And we get the standard scene of everyone reading the paper, because people used to read the newspaper back in the day, and sharing their opinions all over whether Spider-Man could be Electro. And Peter is upset at the hospital because now not only does Jameson already hate him, and people already hate him because of the Bugle, but now they think that he's a supervillain too, in addition to already thinking he's a supervillain, but someone else. Peter gets some news from the hospital about how things are going really bad for Aunt May, asks for $1,000 advance because it's a very personal matter. And Jameson yells at him, says he just wants a hot rod he'd want to buy. He's never going to lend him money, but if you can bring me photographic proof that Spider-Man is Electro, I'll gladly give you the money. And that gives Peter an idea. So there is a huge reward for Electro's capture. And going around, swinging, he sees a guy looking at a telescope around the area, and his spider sense goes off, and Electro is nearby trying to get into a deserted apartment there and putting away his stolen goods. He takes pictures of Electro and then fights with him for a bit. Electro knocks him out with when Spider-Man, as shown on the cover, imagine that, a cover that doesn't lie. He approaches Electro from behind and gets shocked into unconsciousness. And, instead of confirming the kill, because thank God he doesn't, Electro then runs away. Spider-Man wakes up a little bit later, and he takes the pictures of Electro to Jameson, who gets angry because it's not proof that Spider-Man is Electro, but he's going to pay him something. Um, and of course, the print of the paper is that this is proof that Spider-Man is Electro. Um, we get the standard reaction from everyone's crazy. Then we get Electro's backstory, because he has seen the same paper and he is very upset because they're telling the wrong story. He was just an ordinary electric lineman named Max Dillon, and while he was working, he ended up shocked by faulty wiring and a lightning strike. And because this is comics, he didn't die. Instead, he became Electro. So he decided that even though he was just a simple lineman, he now has the ability to design a costume and weaponry and the like, so that he can utilize his powers more. He goes to attack people, and that's how we get Electro. Peter then overhears, a radio broadcast about it on his way to the hospital. Speaks with that May for a little bit there about what's going on, with her health. She, asks him if he won't ever leave her, and that of course guilts him even more because she's in dire straits. Betty has shown up once again, which actually helps encourage Peter that he does have friends there, and they wait some very long minutes together. Not even saying a word, but a very nice moment between the two of them. Nothing needs to be said because they're there for one another, and that's tremendous, especially with what's going to be happening with Betty later on in the book. So Jameson has gotten himself involved. There's a prison riot nearby, and Electro is getting people out of there. The cops are trying to take down people trying to escape. In the middle of the operation that's being done on Aunt May, she calls out for Peter. He takes her hand, and that's able to help her go down. The sedatives that they gave her, knock her out for now. The operation was successful. He tells Betty, they're both excited, and he says, look, she's got to go to the office because she knows about the detention house riot, and she asked Peter not to go there, but he has to because the dangerous ones are the ones he pays the most for. And she's afraid, from her perspective, rightly so, that he's beginning to enjoy the danger and the excitement, just like someone else she knew, which of course we'll find out in a couple issues what that means. And that, of course, caused a little bit of friction between them, starting their relationship in this really rocky way. One of the reasons ultimately why they will never be together forever as man and wife. So Peter then goes off with Spider-Man to go face Electro. Jameson sees this, having already seen Electro and instigating the riot, realizes that he'll be a laughingstock. And why? Because what he didn't know, because of Peter Parker, who he was the one who misled him after all. Because it could never be Jameson's fault. So Spider-Man infiltrates the prison, uses a spider signal to mess with the people there, beats up some of the rioting prisoners, then goes to, fight against Electro, uses some nearby chairs, steel chairs, to redirect the flow of the lightning that Electro sends his way. Spider-Man then reveals he's wearing rubber gloves to hit Electro with. Electro says, fine, well, I'm going to get really bright, and that's going to mess you with your vision there. He then puts some ball bearings on the floor, which causes him to trip. One of the other prisoners comes to attack him. Spider-Man kicks out most of them, barely dodges some attacks from Electro. Electro then brings out a gun because, why not? He's got electric powers, but you know what? What beats that? Gun. Until what beats gun? Well, web shooters, obviously. And they plug the gun up. Electro goes to fight Spider-Man more, and Spider-Man goes to some of the nearby water mains with a fire hose attached, conveniently so. Then gets it to short out Electro. Electro is beaten, and we get a really great moment here. Spider-Man taking the mask off, and he says, if this was a movie, I'd gasp in shock, and I'd say, good heavens, the Butler. But this guy, I never saw before. Which is really great because, typically speaking, in comics, this would be someone that the hero already knew, someone that had a personal investment against fighting with them. But no, sometimes they're just random people out there who randomly get, shocked by a thunder, a lightning bolt, and become supervillains. Great. So, he takes pictures of this all, and gives them to Jameson at the Bugle, who is very upset with Peter, and Betty has to go between the two of them as that's part of her job. She's very upset too. Um, Jameson threatens to fire and sue Peter Parker, but he's like, yeah, you're not going to do either one because he's freelance, number one, because that's how Jameson wanted things. You can't fire someone who doesn't work for you. But he also has pictures that he has for him of the Spider-Man and Electro fight. And Jameson changes lanes immediately, talks about how great Peter is. He wasn't actually angry. He was just like messing with him. He's all heart. Then Peter sells the photo to him. And then Jameson talks about how he's robbing Peter because he's not paying him what he's worth, because this is early Jameson, where he's not at his most altruistic. Not to say Jameson has never been altruistic, but not nearly as good as he could have been. Betty is upset with him because he went where she told him not to go. And she tells him that without telling him completely, like, hey, there was someone I knew you remind me of. I don't want to be hurt again. And Peter, of course, takes the wrong message because he's a young teenager, and that's what they do. And he walks away before Betty can explain herself, so we can have some relationship drama. Peter then meets with Aunt May at the hospital. She asks where Betty's at, and he says, oh, she was just too busy. She couldn't come today. And then he leaves later on, realizing that, I've got to apologize to her. I was the one messed up here. And Betty has rushed that way to the hospital, and they go off together, each feeling the first pangs of that emotion we call love. And that is our issue. So this is a really good one. Is Electro the greatest villain ever? No. Is his origin the greatest ever? No. Is it absolutely Marvel contrived? Absolutely. But what we get here are some great character moments with our supporting cast, and that ultimately is what keeps us around in here. Yeah, we love the action, we love the super villains, and see Peter in the fights and the like. But having him actually be supported by people in his life who can cause good or ill, depending on how things are told, perfect. Like right here, we get more about Betty and a reason for why she would not be as big on him being a bombastic and flashy. And being a danger seeker just for the sake of getting pictures because she doesn't know he's Spider-Man. And if she did, that would make things even worse. Because Spider-Man seems like a person who's just out there for the heck of it. As far as she's aware, she doesn't know the noble reasons for why Peter is Spider-Man. To make sure that what happened to Uncle Ben never happens to anyone else. With that great power comes great responsibility and all that jazz. So there's some nice relationship drama here, but it's not what you would expect in that there's actually some resolution. Obviously, it's not happening on panel because there's only so many pages, but they actually talk about it. And that's great because things could go really worse. And as mentioned earlier, it's also really great. Betty showing an interest in Peter, shows an interest in his family, and goes out to meet Aunt May in this operation. And it's not a cliche quite yet that, oh no, something bad is happening to Aunt May, there's some operation that needs to be done. Oh no, will she make it? Blah, blah, blah. She's got this unnamed illness. Peter, you're going to have to go fight Dr. Octopus to get this special chemical, make sure she's okay. Or, no, oh no, Aunt May has cancer. And then suddenly she doesn't because comics. Oh no, she got shot by an assassin's bullet and should have died, rightly so, because she's, 150 years old or whatever. Like, they typically don't survive bullet wounds, but we're going to keep her alive long enough for you to go sell your marriage to Mephisto. Anyways, yeah, this is where it's not a cliche yet. This is where we see a young boy who is becoming a man wrestling. He was already wrestled with the death of one of only two parental figures he has left. Now having to do it with her. And if she dies, what happens? What's he going to do? How's he going to feel? What's he going to experience? Having that loss a second time over. That's big. And it's something that unfortunately has become a cliche because of how people treat Aunt May. She's just this old, defenseless bag who is just huge nag and has no real personality of her own besides hating Spider-Man and loving Peter Parker. Now, when a good, competent writer comes along, JMS, for instance, and actually makes her realize who Peter is, talks to him about this so they can air out their feelings together, and then has them work together, perfect. That actually gives her some character. That she doesn't remain static. But once again, for right here and now, it's fine because while this is where the cliche originates from, it's still the first time it's really happened. Outside, we've had some scares earlier, but like, no, this is a serious operation. She's old. Like, he's already lost Uncle Ben. What happens if he loses her? This is fine. And then Jameson is at his most, not at his most villainous here, but very close. Wait till we get to some Spider Slayers later on. But this is very different than the Jameson will eventually get, where there is some altruism there in who he is. But this one is all profit all the time, baby. And how dare you make me do this? This is clearly your fault, not mine, even though I signed off on it. So yeah, an excellent issue. And that, of course, will take us to our next issue, which will be Amazing Spider-Man 10. This was released on December 9th, 1963. The story is called The Enforcers. Written by Stan Lee, penciled by Steve Ditko, inked by Steve Ditko, lettered by Sam Rosen, edited by Stan Lee. So what else was going on in Marvel this month? Well, in Journey into Mystery 101, we get Zarko the Tomorrow Man, menacing Thor as Loki schemes to get rid of Thor once and for all. Zarko is eventually, even though he appeared first, he's a discount king. I mean, there's no other really way to put it. Like, the things that make Kang really great, with being from the future, the technological advances he has, wanting to conquer the past and make things his own. These are all aspects that Zarko has. He just doesn't have the same gravitas as Kang. A very different costume, a very different outlook. And that's why we get like the Ravana stuff with Kang and all that. That actually gives him a little more character. Then, of course, there's all the retcons with Immortus and Ramatut and blah, 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 Scarlet Centurion and more. And that give a little more depth there. So Zarko's fine. We'll eventually get a Marvel team up where he and Thor, where Spider-Man and Thor fight him way later on. Then, of course, in Tales to Astonish 53, we have the Porcupine returning for revenge against Giant Man and the Wasp for the last time they beat him. And in Fantastic Four 24, we get the Enfant Terrible, Terrible, something French, who then rages in the city, forcing the Fantastic Four to stop the child being. It's whatever. Not the best they've ever done. Lee and Kirby. And Strange Tales 118, we have the Wizard masquerading as the Human Torch to ruin his reputation because he's got to prove he's smarter than the Human Torch, which, thank God, eventually he starts to match wits against Reed Richards instead, because one of them is actually an intellectual match and the other is Johnny. And we also have Doctor Strange working to exorcise, possessed people in a Bavarian town, a very forgettable early Doctor Strange story. Then we get this Tales of Suspense 51, where the Scarecrow appears to blackmail Tony Stark, forcing Iron Man to then fight and stop this vile villain. Now, on to what we care about. Amazing Spider-Man number 10. In an okay-ish cover, we get the big man. We get, the Enforcers, who are, they're, if Peter was Batman, maybe they would look like a threat. But they're just dudes with gimmicks. But whatever. So moving on, we then see this group of criminals, stealing from this place. Spider-Man sees them, tries to hang on. This, of course, is a plan for them to capture Spider-Man, created by the big man. But Peter's like, I don't really know what's going on. No one's going to make, a sap out of me, gets away just in time, then goes up to the helicopter that they're using and gets hit with some gas that causes him to fall to the ground. They're all expecting Spider-Man to be dead. The big man has then called all the other gangs in and said, look, I'm going to be the leader of our crime syndicate here. And later on, of course, we'll get the Magia. We can't use the Mafia because, obviously there are criminals out there who use that title. So maybe we don't want them hurting us in real life, but we still want to use criminal organizations. So the big man, to ensure that he's going to be in charge, fights against these nameless thugs with the enforcers. We get Fancy Dan using his, footwork. And this was enough in the 60s to be a threat. Then we have the Ox, who no one can do anything about. Ox, of course, will have later on, after he dies, a twin brother who looks exactly like him, if I remember correctly. Then we have Montana, who, as opposed to people with a gun, has a whip and a cowboy rope and the like. So, that's how you become crime boss of New York back in the day. Because, of course, Kingpin doesn't exist yet. Silverman doesn't exist yet. Tombstone doesn't exist yet. Plenty of others I could probably mention there, but just enough there. We then flash over to Peter, who is leaving the Forest Hills Hospital. About to go to the Forest Hills Hospital. And he sees that Liz and Flash are there, and they've actually heard about what happened to his aunt. And Liz wanted to come and see it because good for her. She also has an interest in Peter, therefore should have an interest in the things he cares about, which of course would be, his mother figure. Flash is acting like he doesn't want to be there, but even though there's a little bit of a hint that he actually kind of does, because he doesn't want to see Peter this way. They still have to talk about this all. And the doctor asks, Peter if he can give a transfusion, but he's scared because he gained his spider strength and the like, from a radioactive spider. And what happens if he gives that to her? Anything could happen. This is the Marvel Universe. She'd become a giant spider monster for all he knows, or he could just outright kill her, which is a smart thing to do, but they don't know that. They think that he's, scared of, giving the blood away. But he eventually decides to get it, even though he's scared he's going to be found out. And as a result, he's a little weaker because, it'll take some time for the blood cells, to rebuild, not enough to where he should be losing his abilities or anything like that. But, of course, when you do get blood for a while, you're a little weaker than normal because, it takes a little time for that blood to be regained by the body, remade by the body. But this is the excuse we'll be getting for this issue for why he's not at his, fittest. He then, speaks about how Aunt May, he tells Aunt May about how the Abbotts, the next door neighbors, who I don't know if we ever see them again, because eventually this, of course, will be, Miss Watson and, of course, Mary Jane Watson later on. A great English right there, Christian. Anyways, they want to take her on a trip to Florida. It'll be just what she needs to pick up her spirits. He's not coming with her because maybe he doesn't want to hang out with a bunch of old people. I don't know. Now, the big man has organized all these crime groups together. They are lifting up entire train cars with helicopters, which I'm fairly certain is not doable. But you know what? Comics, the enforcers have attacked a bunch of people. The cops are trying to find them, but all these small fry that they're going after in Jameson's eyes are not the problem. What the real problem is that Spider-Man is still out there. So what they shouldn't be focusing on these small fry. They should be going after the ultimate villain in Spider-Man, but the police don't think the same way that Jameson does. And they kind of ask him, hey, why don't you use your paper to actually do something good and help us get information out there about the big man? And Jameson's like, nonsense. Spider-Man made up the big man so that he could look better and get away with his crimes. Jameson then gives this news to Foswell, Frederick Foswell, one of his workers there, to ask him, hey, can't you do something about this? And Foswell's like, hey, last time we did this, you said that Spider-Man was Electro, and that was wrong. Maybe we shouldn't be doing something like that. Foswell, of course, looks like the sheepish, meek guy, which, of course, will play into the reveal. Betty, of course, tries to placate, Foswell and make me feel a little better because Jameson's a very prickly person. The enforcers then go to attack Betty Brant because she owes them money, but she tells them she already paid off the whole loan, but she is then told that she hasn't paid the interest, which got doubled since yesterday by the big man. They are accosting her. Peter then goes to confront them because he's very upset in his civvies. And the Ox grabs Peter, tries to crush him a little bit, and of course he can't give away his secret identity. He's told to let him go. Peter gets thrown to the ground. He wants them to go and confront them. Betty's stopping him from doing that because obviously she doesn't know that he's Peter Parker. And she doesn't want to tell him the truth because she doesn't want to tell him that she foolishly borrowed money from a loan shark. Because if she does, she knows Peter. He's going to want to try and help, and he's just weak and frail and simple, and like he couldn't possibly be doing anything about this. And she lies, saying that it's a case of mistaken identity. Peter, of course, sees right through this lie, but she runs away because she can't handle it. It's a lot, as opposed to last time. Like it's a little too much for her to speak all in one. So Peter then dresses up as Spider-Man to go track down the enforcers. Finds a guy he calls his Weasel, who is in the know about all these different organizations and the like. He has webbed his eyes up, tells him that he's in his spider web, and that he better tell him what he wants to know, because he has created this fake spider to intimidate him and to give him the information he wants. The big man and the enforcers are there as he arrives. He punches Ox, and of course can't do as much as he normally would because he's weaker because of the blood transfusion, even though he shouldn't be this weak. But once again, comics. Fights against the enforcers, manages to make them look like fools for a bit. His spider sense goes off as the lights go off, and he sees J. Jonah Jameson walking by and wonders, could he be the big man? He's got kind of the same. It looks like he has the same build. He's someone smart, someone with money, someone who knows what's going on. But like even he can't bring himself to actually believe that Jameson is the big man. But like it's still, that doubt has been planted in his mind. He didn't go back home to call Betty to try and talk to her, but she is refusing to pick up the phone for a moment until she's like, "Look, I'm being silly. Let me go talk to him." But then she can't bring herself to say anything except, "Hey, stay away. I'll speak to you tomorrow," which leaves Peter upset. The next day, Jameson's in an okay mood for himself. Doesn't know where Betty is, where Peter asks him, because she had to go out of town for a while, and he's got to go train a new secretary with no explanation. And then Jameson is not caring about any of this right now because he's got papers to make, people to, train and the like. And Peter's just kind of standing around. It's like, why don't you make yourself useful and give me some pictures on Spider-Man? And tells him to go tell Foswell that he's writing a new column on it. Peter then talks to Foswell, about what Jameson thinks, and like Foswell's like, "Look, man, I print whatever the boss tells me to," and because of old prune face there. So Peter then goes back to his house, paces around in costume with his mask off, decides that if he can't do it as Spider-Man, maybe he could do it as Peter Parker to get himself captured. So he goes to school and has told everyone there that he knows who the big man is. And Flash can't, handle this. Everyone thinks that he's lying about it. But maybe Peter actually knows about this all because he's very smart. So Flash then, takes him aside and says, "Hey, like, this isn't like you. You shouldn't be saying stuff like this. Like, you could get hurt. Like, the enforcers could take you out," which for Flash is immense character development here. And Peter even thanks him. Like, didn't even know that he cared. But of course, some crotchety old man, because that's who all the gangsters really are at the end of the day, has overheard this at a high school while I was around there. Who knows? Crazy old men just kind of hung around high schools back in the day, I guess. This information gets to the big man, says that Peter Parker knows who he is. And the boss says, "Of course I know who Peter Parker is." So, who could it be? Could it be someone introduced in this issue? pretty much. So Peter Parker has been taken by the enforcers and in the process locked up for a bit, then changes clothes into Spider-Man, easily breaks out of the jail that they're in, then attacks the enforcers and the different criminals working with them. They try and take him down with their various abilities, I hesitate to say. But he's gotten a little stronger this time. He has shined his spider signal to the outside world to let the police know where they're at. As he's taken on these crooks, the big man tries to shoot him, tries to get away. Spider-Man confronts him, but he's managed to get away. In the fracas at that time, J. Jonah Jameson has gone into the Daily Bugle, and he's angry because he hasn't been able to prove that Spider-Man is the mass leader of the Syndicate. Spider-Man still doesn't know if he's the leader, the enforcers and the like. Of course, Foswell comes in to talk to Jameson, and he is been found out by the police as the actual big man, which of course shocks everyone there because they looked into the evidence that was in his car, which was speeding away from the garage. And he used special built-up shoes, an oversized padded jacket, and a small amplifier to disguise his voice, which is why this meek person can actually portray himself as a bigger guy. And he'd have gotten away with it too, if not for some crummy luck, because Scooby-Doo hasn't been invented yet. So there's no meddling kids to blame. And Peter outside is like, what? I mean, I kind of helped with this, but I didn't actually solve it. So I'm just like here to just get the information. And Jameson's like, look, at least admit that Spider-Man was working with you. Please, I don't want to be a laughingstock again. And Foswell is not going to give him the satisfaction. And this is when we get a moment for J. Jonah Jameson, where he explains why he doesn't like Spider-Man. The early reason why. There's more that'll be added later on. For right here and now, even though Spider-Man risks his life day after day with no thought of reward, if a man like him is good, is a hero, then what am I? I can never respect myself while he lives. Spider-Man represents everything that I'm not. He's brave, powerful, and unselfish. The truth is, I envy him. If I, J. Jonah Jameson, millionaire, man of the world, civic leader, I'd give everything I own to be the man that he is. But I can never climb to his level. So all that remains for me is to try to tear him down because heaven help me, I'm jealous of him. Forget to in a moment. So Peter has gone back home. Aunt May sent him a letter to let him know that she's okay in Florida. Betty is still miserable somewhere in Pennsylvania, crying to herself, and that is where we end the issue. So, goofy, stupid villains aside, with an act of whatever they have, another great issue here for Lee and Ditko. This is where we get a little more into the organized crime side of Spider-Man. We're starting to develop the roots there. That'll be a part of his story to this present day. The big man is a good character. The enforcer is not so much. It's definitely one of those, you can guess it's not going to be J. Jonah Jameson. Even though you can argue when we get Norman Osborn in a bit, it's kind of the same thing, but the difference is it's not set up in one issue. The Green Goblin's identity is one of those things that's kept up over time. For the big man himself, there's really no one else it could be. Like Jameson is like a big red herring in this scenario. So what are you supposed to do? Well, this Foswell guy, yeah, he doesn't look like he could be the big man, but this is the Marvel Universe. He could change his size. He could be a mutant. He could be gone into a big and tall store and getting hit by a lightning bolt that made him the big man every other day or so. So the explanation they give is enough for them to explain that. And of course, on the other side of things, we get the Peter-Betty relationship kind of fracturing a little bit here, with Betty not revealing about what she knows because she's upset about everything that's going on that side. Of course, we'll get explanations for that in a little bit, in a couple issues, for why she's acting the way she is. So there's some nice relationship drama there. Then, of course, we get J. Jonah Jameson. Now, I am colored by my knowledge of who he becomes. So it's hard for me to divorce myself from the knowledge of what happens later from what's happening right now, because this is the reason as stated at this point in time in history for why he thinks the way he does about Spider-Man, is that I'm not a hero. I'm not like him. So I have to tear him down. And that is evil, baby. Like, this is the reason why Jameson is one of his greatest foes for years to come. Is that we start off here. It's like it feels like it's irrational from the very beginning. Like, why just Spider-Man? Why not these other heroes? It's not just because you're in Spider-Man's book and that's why you're just focused on him. No, there's something more here, Jameson. And the reason is he's jealous. He's envious. Spider-Man goes out every single day without reward, without any way of making his name known, despite the fact that every single day Jameson speaks the things he does about him, and he still does the right thing day after day. So if he can discredit Spider-Man, then Jameson looks better. Jonah looks better by default. What a tremendous character motivation here. And it's going to play into who he is, when eventually we get to the Scorpion and, the Spire Slayers and the like, of why does he keep doing these stupid things? Why does he keep paying millions upon millions of dollars to enhance these different, villains along the way to try and take down Spider-Man? It's because he's jealous. And what a very human thing to feel, to look at someone like him and go, no. As long as you exist, I don't look good. It's almost similar in some respects to like a Superman and Lex Luthor. Like, obviously, they're very different creatures, Lex and Jonah, but there's something there. So it's like, as long as you exist, you prove what I think to be wrong. So I cannot abide that. The world is better off without you here. Or the world is better with you here, but you discredited and me uplifted. So yeah, a tremendously great job here with this issue. I am really enjoying this early Spider-Man. Go reading through it again. So next time we will be in, if I'm remembering correctly, Amazing Spider-Man 11, Strange Tales 119, and Amazing Spider-Man 12. Yes, and that should be it for the next time. So, guys, thank you for all that you do. If you're on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe down below, comment as well to help with the algorithm there, help them find more people. If you're on listening to this in podcast form, just feel free to leave a 5-star review, share it with the people you love. Let them know if you want to talk about more Spider-Man, this is the place to go. Yeah, so that's it. So until next time, webheads, see ya. And remember that with great podcasts, there must also come great responsibility.